Honourable colleagues, before I delve into the substance of this motion, I want to take this opportunity to thank each and every Canadian who is on the front line every single day, but especially right now as we deal with a worldwide pandemic. Our first responders and frontline healthcare workers are putting themselves at great risk, not only for contracting COVID-19 itself, but also all the added stresses that comes with the endless hours and the tragedy of what they see every single day. Nous savons qu'en raison de cette pandémie,
we know that because of this pandemic and measures that have been taken to deal with it, mental health incidents are on the rise, as are incidents of domestic violence and violence against children. And it is our first responders who have front row seats to these events. I would therefore like to say to those who are currently suffering from post-traumatic stress, we see you, we thank you, and we assure you that you will be cared for.
Who have succumbed to this pernicious mental health disease, we remember and thank all of you for your selfless service to your country and your fellow man. My thoughts are also with their grieving families, families like our friends Mary and Stephen Ricks, who were with us every single step of the way a couple of years ago as we passed Bill C-211. I want to say to Mary and Stephen and all of those who have lost loved ones to post-traumatic stress disorder, your sons, your daughters, parents, sisters, brothers were heroes, and they will be remembered as such. On June 21st, 2018, Bill C-211, an act respecting a federal framework on post-traumatic stress disorder, received royal assent. Colleagues, as you may remember, this was a private member's bill authored by a Member of Parliament, Todd Doherty. I became the sponsor of the bill here in the Senate after hearing MP Doherty speak so passionately about it at National Caucus, and then again when we met in my office. I could see how heavily this was weighing on him as we sat one evening and spoke about the toll PTSD was taking on our first responders and their loved ones. I could see that this deeply was personal for MP Doherty. MP Doherty drafted this bill after the passing of one of his dear friends, Darren Anderson. Mr. Anderson had been a 17-year veteran firefighter who was struggling with PTSD and unfortunately lost his battle. On September 15, 2018, Darren took his own life, leaving behind him his wife and 3 children. He was considered by many in his community to be a hero, but even a hero can struggle at times, and sadly, when they don't have the help they need, they can fall. This story is tragic, but it is far from the only one. All across our great country, our first responders are in dire need of help, and that help isn't always consistent. Bill C-211 had one goal: to establish a framework, post-traumatic stress disorder, or what is commonly called PTSD, to ensure that each and every first responder has access to the same resources to deal with their mental health, no matter where they're located. Someone in Winnipeg, Saguenay, or Toronto needs to be able to be adequately treated, and that includes their loved ones as well. Ces hommes et ces femmes se mettent en danger.
These men and women put themselves in harm's way to help their fellow citizens when they're at their most vulnerable. The least that we can do for them is to provide them with adequate care when they themselves are in need. It is inconceivable that people that we rightly call heroes be left to fend for themselves. Every morning they don their uniforms knowing that this may be the last time they'll see their loved ones. They are ready to risk everything because they feel obliged to help and to serve. Their actions are the very essence of altruism, and they deserve to be treated with dignity. It is our responsibility to ensure that they will receive all the support they need.
They are witnessing events so terrible that just reading about them is horrifying. They are the first people who arrive on these frightful scenes, and they must do all that they can to save what isn't salvageable, and in those too often unsalvageable and traumatic scenes. Just to give you a sense of the distress first responders often feel, I want to share part of the testimony from Natalie Harris, a former advanced care paramedic in Ontario, who she appeared at a House of Commons committee on May 16, 2017, and I quote her, "It's not normal to have a person ask you to just take their leg and arm off because they were experiencing so much pain from being trapped in a car with multiple open fractures all over their body. It's not normal to learn that the patient who hanged himself in the night before had a second noose waiting for his wife, had his son not called 911 at the right time. It's not normal to witness a young woman, 7 months pregnant, rub her belly with the only limb that could move as she had a stroke that would leave her disabled. It's not normal to see the cell phone on the road beside the obviously dead driver crushed between the pavement and the car, who was texting and driving. Natalie went on to say in her testimony, it's not normal to experience and see the look of true evil when you learn how 2 innocent women were murdered. It's not normal to see someone die before your eyes more times than you can actually account for. Knowing what they are witnessing on a daily basis, it's not surprising that a lot of these heroes are suffering gravely from PTSD. According to a study from Stuart Wilson, Hammerder, Julian, and Gorgi Boachev from the University of Regina, and published in the Journal of Community Safety and Well-Being, it is estimated that PTSD prevalence rate for police officers could be as high as 32%. Paramedics in Canada, 26%. Firefighters, 17%. In comparison, this rate is about 9% for our general population. Given the situation they face daily, these high rates are not surprising at all. They suffer tremendously, and if we don't do our duty, they will continue to suffer, colleagues, in silence. It has now been more than 2 years after this bill became law. The government has released a report on what they intend to do to make sure that our heroes have the resources they need that are dealing with PTSD. Unfortunately, it has almost been a year now, and not much since that report has changed. The inequalities in resources available to help first responders across our country persists. We would think that the well-being of the very people who dedicate their lives to keep us safe would be our top priority, especially now during a pandemic when we are calling upon them to face even more stress on a daily basis. CBC News has reported that Winnipeg firefighters and paramedics only get an annual maximum of $350 for psychological appointments under their employee benefits. This amount would not even cover 2 full sessions with a psychologist, since the recommended rate in 2020 in Canada for psychologists is $195 for a 50-minute session. Needless to say, this kind of compensation is simply not enough. In comparison, the Saskatchewan Health Authority says that their paramedics can receive up to $2,000 per year for the same kind of appointments. In Toronto, that amount can go up to $3,500 annually. The same problem is seen for firefighters. A firefighter in Regina will qualify for $500 annually. If the same firefighter were to live in Calgary, that amount would be $1,000. If he was in Halifax, it would be $1,500. And if he was in Toronto, again, it would be $3,500. This is an unacceptable situation, colleagues. People deserve the same treatment, no matter their location in Canada. They're all doing similar jobs and are witnessing similar traumatic events. They should all receive matching support. This lack of resources is leading to an epidemic of suicides in our first responders' ranks. Josh Clenson, a second-generation firefighter who left his job in 2020 after serving his community in Winnipeg, realized something very disturbing. He said that during his time as a firefighter, and I quote him, there had been more people he knew who died by suicide than in active fireground operations. Ces décès auraient pu être évités. Il aurait dû.
These deaths could have been prevented. These people should have had the same access to resources available in Toronto, Halifax, or Calgary. Their lives weren't worth less because they served in Winnipeg. Our heroes have suffered enough. They have given everything they could to keep us safe. The least that we could do is to take care of them and to ensure that each and every one is treated with respect. Honourable colleagues, the government must be held accountable to ensure that this situation does not continue. That's where this bill comes in, a bill that was adopted in both chambers with unanimous support from all parties. The government is required by law to close these gaps and eliminate these inequalities.
It's been more than 2 years since the legislation received royal assent, and it's been almost a year since the report has been published. And yet, colleagues, the situation clearly remains unsatisfactory. So has the government satisfied its obligations under the law? And if so, why isn't it working? Does it require more time for the system to catch up, or is there more that we can be doing and should be doing to help people that are supposed to be there to help us? These are questions that we have the power and resources and, quite frankly, colleagues, the obligation to answer. That is why I asked the Standing Senate Committee on Social Affairs, Science and Technology to be authorized to examine and report on the implementation and success of the federal framework on post-traumatic stress disorder by the Government of Canada as it relates to the 4 identified priorities with a focus on data collection. That is, improving tracking of the rate of PTSD amongst first responders and its associated economic and social costs. Colleagues, just as you supported the initial legislation, unanimously I might add, dealing with this very important and very urgent matter, I hope that you will support this motion. I believe we owe it to the men and the women from whom we ask so much, the men and the women who ask for so little in return. Honourable colleagues, we, in a show of solidarity in both houses a couple of years ago, passed this motion. And I think it's incumbent on us as parliamentarians to do the follow-up right now to find out where the bottleneck is. Because at the end of the day, in the middle of a pandemic as we're facing right now, there is now no greater need for our first responders than the needs they currently have. So I urge honourable colleagues to support this motion, to get to work as quickly as possible, to get to the bottom of some of the discrepancies that we're facing with PTSD that many of our first responders are suffering. Thank you.